Welcome to Miss Taylor's class videos. And today we're going to talk about two special tricks that we can do with factoring. I'm going to show you how to do it without the trick, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the trick. So just pick the method that works best for you. So before we get started, to do our trick, we must know our perfect squares or know how to find them in the calculator. So I'm going to give you the first 15 perfect squares. You really shouldn't see any numbers bigger than this year in class. So 1 squared is the same thing as 1 times 1, and 1 times 1 is 1. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64, 9 squared is not, it's 81. 10 squared is 100. Hopefully you know those first 10, because those first 10 are some of those math facts that y'all learned back in elementary school that y'all are usually really good at. Now, the more rare ones, 11 squared is 121, 12 squared is 144, 13 squared is 169, 14 is 196, and 15 is 225. So, real quick before we get going, what we need to understand about perfect squares is if I have x squared and I take the square root, our square root is going to get rid of the square and it's just going to leave me with x. So if I square root 4, we could also write this as 2 squared, and the square root gets rid of the square, which leaves us with just 2. So all our square root does is it gets rid of the square inside of the number. So that's just a helpful thing to understand and to understand how this chart works. So if we have 4 and we take the square root, we're looking for that number there is our answer. All right, so let's talk about factoring these special cases if you forget the trick. So we always been working with numbers and factoring numbers that look like this, that are trinomials with 3 different terms. But if we look at this answer, it's not a trinomial. It's a binomial, and it's missing the bx term. So this trick is going to work when we're missing our bx. But if we remember, when we do our x, we put our c on the top, and we put our b on the bottom. So in this case, our c is negative 36. But if we're missing the b, that makes our b 0. So when we go and we factor this, we throw it in our calculator. We go y equals, we go negative 36 divided by x. We hit second graph. And then we go and we write down our factors. So I've got 1 and negative 36. I've got 2, negative 18, 3, negative 12, 4, negative 9. I skipped 5 because it was the decimal, and then we have 6, negative 6. So now we're going to add them together like we've been doing this whole time. So 1 minus 36 is negative 35. 2 and negative 18 is negative 16. 3 and negative 12 is negative 9. 4 and negative 9 is negative 5, and then 6 minus 6 is 0. So our winning combination is our 6 and negative 6, and so our answer is 6x plus 6, x minus 6. So again, we do the same thing here. We draw our x, we put our c up top, and because it's a binomial and not a trinomial, that's what tells me that my c is 0. So I have 1 and negative 81, 3, negative 27, and then I have 9 and negative 9. So for us to get 0, it has to be the same number, and they have to be opposite signs. X plus 9, x minus 9. So we can do most of these problems without the trick I'm about to show you. So again, difference of squares is a polynomial in the form of a squared plus b squared, which means it's a binomial. And that means that there is no bx term. Or we can think about it as a squared value subtracted from another squared value. So if our polynomial begins as the difference of two squares, which is a squared minus b squared. Let me actually write the number correctly. Then we know its factors are going to be a plus b and a minus b. That's where we get that difference. One is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. So again, the way that we get rid of a square is that we're going to square root. So to do this trick, I'm going to take the square root of the first number and I'm going to take the square root of the second number. So the square root of 1 equals 1 and the square root of 49. So I'm going to show you real quick how to put in your calculator in case you don't have your perfect squares memorized. I'm going to hit second, which is my blue button, and then I'm going to hit x squared, which gives me my square root button, and then I'm just going to type in 49, which tells me 7. So if we use our difference of squares rules, I'm going to write my x down twice because x squared separates my x into 2. So I'm going to take the first number and put it in front of x. I'm going to make one positive, I'm going to make one negative, and I'm going to put the second number behind the sign. And so this is our answer. So if we move to our next one, I'm going to take the square root of the first number, and I'm going to take the square root of the last number. So the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 1 is 1. So now I'm going to write my x's down. I'm going to split those x's. I'm going to write my first number in front of x. One x is going to be positive. The other one's going to be negative. And then I'm going to write down my second number. And that is our answer. And that's our trick if we recognize that this is a difference of two squares. So again, square root 64, and we're going to square root 9. So 64 is 8, 9 is 3, which tells me I'm going to write down my x twice. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. I'm going to put the 8 in front because it was in front of the x. I'm going to put the 3 after the sign because the 9 was at the end. And again, square root the first one, square root the second one. So if we square root 4, we get 2. If we square root 16, we get 4. So I'm going to write x plus, x minus, the 2 goes in front, and the 4 goes behind. And that's our answer. That's our trick for difference of two squares. All right, so here we're going to talk about our perfect square trinomials. Perfect square trinomials. So in this case, we have all three terms. And then we're looking at all three terms. We're looking at, again, the first number. Actually, no, sorry. I was trying to teach you the trick. So now I'm just going to go into how we can do this without our trick. So we write down our x. We write down our c. We write down our b. Now we're going to list our factors. We've got 1 and 25. We have 5 and 5. So we add them together and I get 26 and I get 10. So our winning factors are there. So we write it as x plus 5 times x plus 5. Now we can also write this down as x plus 5 squared. And that's our most correct answer. But this is also correct as well. Oh, that's a terrible arrow. Sorry, guys. So again, we're going to do this one right here. We're going to write our x. We're going to put 9 on top, negative 6 on bottom. So we have 1 and 9. We have 3 and we have 3. So we add them together and we get 10. Ooh, it's a negative. So my numbers should have all been negative. So I should have gotten a negative 10 and a negative 6. So this is my winning combo. So x minus 3 times x minus 3. Or I'm going to write it as x minus 3 squared. So a perfect square trinomial is the result of squaring a binomial, and we'll have one of the two following formats. So what we need to look for to determine which format we need is we're going to look at that second term. If our second term is positive, our answers are going to be positive. So it's going to be a plus b times a plus b, or a plus b squared. If we look at that second term, and our second term is negative, then my answer is going to have a negative. A minus b times a minus b, or a minus b squared. All right, so now let's look at these guys right here. So I'm going to test this the same way I tested the other ones. I'm going to take the square root of the first number, and I'm going to take the square root of the last number. So the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 81 is 9. And so I'm going to write down the first number in front of my x. I'm going to check my second term. If my second term is positive, I'm going to put a positive, and then I'm going to put the second number, and then we square it. So I'm going to take the square root of the first number. I'm going to take the square root of the last number. So that's 4, and that's 3. So I'm going to write down my x. I'm going to put the 4 in front. I'm going to check, I should have had an x there. I'm going to check my second term. It's positive, so I write down positive, and then I write down my last number. Do not forget to write that square, because if you don't write that square, it is not correct. We're going to square root the first number. We're going to square root the second. So that means our trick is going to work. So I'm just going to write down x. I can put that 1 in front, but typically we don't. I'm going to look at my second term. My second term is negative, so I'm going to write down negative, and then I'm going to write that second number. All right, by now we should know the square root of 1 is 1. And we're going to square root the last one, which gets us 5. So I'm going to write down x. I look at the sign on my second term. It's positive. And that's all there is to it. But remember, if you forget your tricks, it will still work using the x method.